What's going on, everybody? It is that time again, the Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 101 on this Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. 24 days from the opener. We are getting very close. Oklahoma Temple at the stadium on Friday, August 30th. Josh Callaway, James D. Jackson, Tom Green with you on a Tuesday. Fall camp is underway. We've talked to 8 players. We've talked to Brent Venables. We had a little viewing window of practice yesterday that was pretty brief, but still pretty illuminating, I think, overall, as far as what we could gather from it. We're off and running. Great stuff. We have some takeaways, some thoughts. We'll get into all that, of course, here on the show. We're also going to kick off our position preview series. We did this last fall. We go through each position, offense and defense, the players to know, our concerns, and then we kind of finish up with our confidence level, basically, in that group. Fun little way to kind of go through the roster one last time before we kick this thing off in 3.5 weeks. But guys, we'll start with fall camp. Like I said, it's underway. We had 2 separate player availability interviews where we talked to 4 guys each. We talked to Brent Venables. We were out of practice yesterday. All that stuff is on the YouTube channel, all the interviews along with Brent Venables and some highlights of practice yesterday. I'll open the floor. 1 or 2 maybe takeaways that stuck out, whether it's from an interview, something somebody said, Brent Venables, what you saw at practice yesterday. We've processed and brought in a lot of information in the last week. What was maybe the 1 or 2 things that stuck out the most to you guys?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that has kind of caught my eye and also is just like the most intriguing thing to me, like the biggest question mark heading into this season is kind of, we talked about it a few times, is the offensive line. So I spent a few minutes over there with offensive line when they first broke out into individual drills. And, one of the things that really stood out to me was Hito Zaida with that first team unit at left guard. He worked there a lot in the spring. They moved Jacob Sexton in there toward the end of spring because of just having to shift some things with the injuries. But I was a little bit surprised to see Hito Zaida there with the first team left guard. And I know Josh, that's a name that has kept popping up when you've spoken to people too. And we kind of talked about it yesterday. It's like, over the last few months, you almost kind of expected his name to like kind of fall back. But he's just sticking around and keeps pushing. Yeah. And we were talking to Jacob Sexton yesterday, and I was asking him a couple questions about just Heat's progress and how far he's come since he came in last year. And he said the biggest thing that's really stood out is that since he got to Oklahoma, he hasn't been timid. A lot of guys they arrive as freshmen, they're a little timid. They don't know kind of their place. But even though he only played 4 snaps last season, he's had no fake confidence is the way that Jacob Sexton put it. He's a guy that wants to get out there. He wants to get physical. He wants to, put his face in the fan. I think that's obviously a very good development for them. There's 2 ways to kind of look at it. You bring in 5 transfers who have all this experience. And, right now, 2 of them are, pretty set as starters. I think it's safe to say with Branson Hickman at center and Febechi Wewu at right guard. Meanwhile, your other 3 spots, you have Jacob Sexton, who you kind of expected to be at left tackle. And now you have Hito Zaida, who's played 4 snaps, and Jake Taylor, who's played like 80 snaps over the last 2 years. Seemingly ahead of these guys that have played thousands of snaps in their career, or in the case of Jaron Hatchett, 350 or whatever snaps. You could look at it as, are these transfers not good enough, or are these guys that have been in the program developing, quicker than a lot of people would expect, and they're actually earning and pushing that time. So I thought that was really interesting, and the fact that Jaron Hatchett, when we were out there yesterday, he was at right guard behind Febechi Wewu, kind of makes sense. We expect him to be at left guard just because. He's got that experience. He's a guy that you kind of expected to plug in there as a more veteran guy coming off that injury. But most of his playing time at Washington was at right guard, so it does make sense that he's taking some reps there. But again, just the biggest thing, Hito Zaida there at left guard, and Jake Taylor, who Jacob Sexton says he's never seen him as excited as he's been, these last several months. And they came in together 3 years ago. So those are probably my 2 biggest takeaways from what we saw yesterday and just what we've heard this first week.
Yeah, I think Tom kind of hit on the most important part of fall camp so far with that offensive line. I want to throw back to when Josh and I were over looking at the running backs during the fall camp practice and everything like that. And I turned to him and I said, I've never seen Xavier Robinson look that, much in shape. Like, he looks really good. We talked about him cutting a lot of unnecessary weight as he got to Smitty. He enrolled early this December, everything like that. And it seems like he's put some back on. It's a lot more muscle. So I've covered him a couple of years now. And he's never looked that good. It's probably not going to matter that much this year, but that was one of my biggest takeaways, seeing a guy that's had that type of transformation in that running back room. But to stick on the running backs, I mean, we noticed that Gavin Sawchuk was going first on the reps. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the depth chart, but obviously he was going first, and then Taylor Tatum was going after him, and that was pretty interesting. Taylor Tatum, he came in kind of late, which is late. He was on time, but late for this group, and he's already one of the front runners, I guess, for that second spot on the team. He's nationally one of the best running backs in the nation. So, I mean, he has the pedigree for it, but it was good to see that already, him having that type of position there. And then I didn't necessarily see it myself, but I'd heard about it. But we talked about it before the meeting, but before the show. But Andrew Anthony was out there running and cutting. That's a very good sign for that receiver group. Having him back, and I know Tom may want to touch on that, because he wasn't just running in straight lines as we may have thought he was going to do. He was running and cutting at the same time. So those are really big takeaways for me. I know outside of the offensive line, which is what everybody really cares about at this time.
Yeah, I mean, Andrell being able to cut at this point, I mean, he's about 10 months, a little less than 10 months removed from that surgery.
9.5.
Mid-October is when he had it. So, I mean, he's making good progress. They're still optimistic that he's going to be ready to go by the opener. Now, I wouldn't expect him to, play a lot of reps, especially early in the season, especially because they kind of, A, they have the depth at wide receiver, and B, they kind of have that 3-game non-conference runway where they can take it easy with him, get him, maybe 10 to 15 reps a game and get him comfortable for SEC play. But I was a little bit surprised to see him cutting, so fluidly and smoothly out there this early in camp, because, Brent Venables almost made it sound like when we spoke to him, not just this week, but at SEC Media Days a couple weeks ago, it's like, yeah, he's running in straight lines. He's not full speed yet.
Yeah,
but he's out there doing stuff. But to see him out there cutting, he was paired with Nick Anderson running like twin out routes. It was good to see, a very promising sign. And just going back to that running back note, I mean, I agree. Like, I think we're all, I don't want to say necessarily surprised by what we've seen from Taylor Tatum, but it's just fascinating to finally see him up close and in person. Because again, he was the top running back in the 2024 class. He was getting some reps with Jackson Arnold yesterday behind Gavin Sawchuk. We also saw him working some with Michael Hawkins during some of those drills. So obviously that running back depth chart's a little bit of fluid right now. They're trying to work out those roles. But, Brent Venables said it himself, and I have a piece up on the site this morning that, he doesn't foresee any limitations in what Taylor Tatum's role can be this year.
Right.
Jackson Arnold talked really highly about, just what Taylor Tatum can bring as kind of a receiving threat out of the backfield. Saw him catch a couple really nice wheel routes from Jackson Arnold during that little viewing period yesterday. So yeah, I've been impressed with what we've seen from him so far. And then Javonte Barnes, he's another guy. It's like very disappointing season last year. He spoke about that. He got up in front of the team before the start of fall camp and kind of gave his testimony about what he's been through, from, being the number 2 guy as a freshman to, struggling through injury as a sophomore, especially after, thinking that he had that injury taken care of last spring. And, Brent Venables said he looks like his old self. Spoke to Javonte Barnes yesterday. He's like, I'm not satisfied with just being my old self. I want to be better than I was as a freshman. So that's encouraging to hear. And, he looks a little bit more explosive. He looks good out there. So if he can stay healthy, that's obviously very beneficial for, the overall status of that running back group.
Yeah, the running back 2 job really intrigues me. Gavin Sawchuk's the guy there. No reason to think otherwise. But yeah, like you said, Javonte Barnes is a guy that I've, been a big fan of. I talked about it a lot last season, that freshman season happened. There's been a kind of like, he just was the forgotten. He was great as a true freshman all year. As Eric Gray's number 2, he had a big Cheez-It Bowl where Gavin Sawchuk had his breakout against Florida State 2 years ago. It was like, that's going to be the duo last year, and it just never happened. His health just wasn't there. But it was a frustrating year for Barnes. And then the spring game happens. He doesn't get a single carry in the spring game, which was bizarre. We talked about that at the time. And I think if you took a poll of us and everybody else who covers this team probably all would have thought this guy's probably out of here. I mean, to have a frustrating year the way he had, and then to not see the field at all in the spring game, it's just, just the writing on the wall in modern college football. But he didn't. He was very open about that yesterday, that he didn't want to leave. He still loves Oklahoma. It feels like DeMarco's his guy. They've had a connection, both Vegas guys, and he stuck it out. And that seems to be paying off right now. I have a very hard time imagining a scenario where he's not a factor, whenever the season starts here in a few weeks. So he's been a big, fascinating storyline for me. Obviously, Taylor Tatum, too. He looks great. I mean, he looks awesome. First time us getting to really see him do anything yesterday in pads. And, he looks the part. He looks great.
Yeah,
obviously, all the other guys are glowing about him. Brent Venables, great things to say as well. One other thing for me, and this is admittedly a low-hanging fruit thing, this team is really, I feel like, becoming Jackson Arnold's team more than ever before. And it makes sense, obviously, because it's he's starting quarterback now relative to his first year, obviously. But just, I was kind of struck yesterday. We talked to him after practice, and his interview's on the YouTube channel, so I recommend fans go watch it. He was really, commanding the mic and talking about his guys in a way that he hadn't before. And he's always been pretty good with the media. I've been fortunate to have covered Jackson for a while, and I talked to him in Elite 11 and stuff when he's in high school. So I've been around him for a while, and he's really come a long way. You see kind of the social media videos of him leading practice and stuff. It's just kind of like you really feel like he is sliding into that face of the program role that you want your quarterback to be. And you wonder if he would get there with guys like Danny Stutzman still around. Mm-hmm. He's really commanding things. I'm really excited to see how that grows more and more. It feels like he's just scratching the surface of what he's going to be as far as a star and things like that. But that stuck out to me. I walked away from the interviews yesterday thinking about that. Man, that felt like a different guy than before. So that stuck out to me certainly too. What about anything else? As far as the open practice, just guys that look good. Anything in particular from that yesterday?
Yeah, I just want to go back to piggyback on the Jackson Arnold thing. Kind of goes back to what we talked about after SEC Media Days. When he was talked about how, at the preparing for the Alamo Bowl, he didn't feel like it was his team because that was still, those guys have been catching passes going all year. So obviously, kind of being thrown into that with 2 weeks to prepare, not the best situation for him to kind of take command. But, Danny Stutzman coming in and saying, that morning before they flew out to Dallas that, he went and worked out with the offense. And he just kind of took a back seat to see who would lead. And it was Jackson Arnold. And he just had this sense of security in Jackson Arnold, stepping up in that leadership role. So it's good to see that kind of carry over in the fall camp now. And I agree. I think it was pretty evident, both in the way that Jackson spoke with the media. And there was that video that, Oklahoma posted on one of the first days of practice of just, Jackson out there on the field kind of commanding the guys. That's obviously what you want to see from the quarterback. As far as other things from the open period, again, there's going to be a little bit low-hanging fruit, and we spoke to him last week, but Dominic Williams, you watch him out there. And again, look, it's very limited what we saw. They're not in full pads yet. They were just in shells and shorts, but you watch him, just explode on those drills. Sure. And he's just got this power, this physicality, and again, this fluidity in what he does that, he is a different kind of dude on the interior of the line that, Oklahoma hasn't had these last couple seasons. I think he's going to be a difference maker. It was really interesting last week hearing, talking about him and Branson Hickman. Obviously, two guys who are very familiar with each other from being at SMU and TCU playing annually, talking about how much they used to hate each other because they had to go head-to-head for 50 snaps a game.
That's a big rivalry. What is that, Iron Skillet, right? That's kind of a funny little underrated storyline.
Yeah, and now they're going up against each other in practice every day, but they're making each other better as opposed to trying to, take each other out every play. So it was interesting for them. I think that those two pickups, obviously, we've talked about it all offseason, just huge for both lines of scrimmage for this team.
I really liked talking with Gentry Williams yesterday. Just getting the chance to catch up with him. He's had so many injuries, and Brent Venables said he started 10 games but only played technically 4 in terms of how game time he had because he had so many injuries. And Gentry Williams talked about that and was talking about coming back from that. He said he's gained about 10 pounds now. He's up to 190, so that's really good for him. Just want to bulk up and get ready for this SEC. And he said, guys like Robert Spears Jennings and Woody Washington are not going to wait on him. He's got to be there for this team. And so that was a big priority for him this offseason. So that was good talking to him, seeing that. And then I want to talk about Ethan Downs, who we all know how good he is in the season that he had last year. But he seems much more of a leader of this unit now. I mean, he was taking the first reps with R. Mason Thomas, and he led the stretching session after when we first got to look at them. So Ethan Downs is obviously shown he can be really, really good. And I'm hopeful to see what he does this year as well, because coming back, obviously more experience, getting to see what he does is going to be exciting to see. So.
Yeah, I agree with both. Gentry Williams is an NFL level player. He just got to stay healthy. I mean, that's just simple. That was a funny comment from Brent Venables. He was like, "Yeah, the guy, he kind of the same thing. Like he's got to stay on the field," which is
it's interesting. The way Brent Venables kind of framed it. You hadn't really thought about it before. It's like, we knew he was dealing with injury, but it's like he started 10 games last season, but still only played like 350 snaps.
Yeah, how many
played like a handful of full games.
Yeah.
Even though he was out there pretty much every week. So if he can stay healthy, that's obviously huge for this secondary.
For sure. A few bonus names for me, just real quick, that just in particular I noted their physical presence yesterday. Nick Anderson, not a surprise there, but man, he looks good. He looks healthy. He's so long, and just I find there to be no way that guy doesn't have a huge year. We talked to him last week as well. He looked great. I thought PJ Adebawore is a monster. He's gotten bigger, which was a big thing. It was just that frame can hold more weight. We all knew it, and he's added to it. I thought he definitely looked to be even more of a behemoth than before. And then one other bonus one, I really thought Robert Spears Jennings looked really good as well, which all the attention is on Billy Bowman because he's one of the best safeties in college football. And Peyton Bowen was, a 5-star prospect, also going to probably be at some point one of the best safeties in college football. But RSJ, I mean, that really creates a very nice trio, the three of them. Brent Venables talked about that there's really not a lot after those three. So it's important to keep those guys healthy and everything this year. But I just, he was one of those ones, and I'm guilty of it too, kind of let's not forget about this guy. He really, again, we're only out there for 20 minutes, but one of the guys, when you're out there for you're making quick snap judgments, is like, he looks good. So Robert Spears Jennings, another one for me. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, on the PJ Adebawore note, I think some people were kind of freaking out because he was like third in the rotation when we were out there. But he's going to play this year.
Yeah,
like, we saw the monster that he was in the spring.
He played in every game last year.
Yeah, he played in every game. He's going to have a bigger role. They're going to rotate, 5-6 guys on those two edge spots. Yeah. And again, what we saw was only like 10 minutes of individual drills on the fourth day of practice without full pads. So don't read too much into, he is, third in the rotation right now behind these guys. It's like, he's going to play. They need him to play. They need him to be good. That's all I wanted to add on the PJ note.
For sure. All right. So 4 practices are in the books. Today is practice 5 Tuesday. So by the time you're listening or watching this, they'll have had their 5th practice in the books. It should be close to wrapping up right about now, next half hour or so. So just getting going. We're going to have more availabilities, hopefully more viewing windows and stuff like that to come. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can make sure to keep up with all that stuff as it gets added. And if you subscribe, you can also turn on notifications so you can be alerted as soon as something gets posted. So we're just getting going. Fall camp just getting underway. Let's go ahead and get into our position preview series. So we did this last fall camp as well. We go through each position. We talk about the players to know and kind of what the concerns are, if there are any. And we finish with a rating 1 to 10 on basically our confidence level in the positions, which is a way of roundabout kind of ranking the positions at the end of fall camp. So we'll start with, we're going to do 3 positions today: quarterback, running back, wide receiver. So we'll start with quarterback. No controversy here, obviously. Jackson Arnold's your starter. The backup is, I guess, up for grabs. You feel like probably Casey Thompson is the favorite, but Michael Hawkins has been great. Yeah. People are very excited about him. The freshman comes in. You also have Brennan Zurbrugg in here. You brought in Steele Wazel, sort of an Oklahoma kid as well. Wassel. Sorry, Steele. Thoughts on the position overall? I mean, I guess relative to maybe even last year, and then we'll obviously come back around and we'll give it a rating. But just general thoughts on the the quarterback room, which is obviously Seth Luttrell's room. It was before, kind of, and it still is. Obviously, no Jeff Lebby now. It's interesting spot, but Jackson Arnold clearly is the guy here. What are we thinking about the room as a whole, though?
I mean, I think as a whole, they're in better shape than they were last year.
I agree.
Dylan Gabriel was more proven than Jackson Arnold is going into this season. But just the depth of that room overall, bringing in a veteran like Casey Thompson, if he's healthy coming off that ACL injury, he's a guy that you don't hesitate to put in there and have confidence that, this offense can still produce. Michael Hawkins Jr., obviously very impressive in the spring, generated a lot of buzz. They think he can be that guy after Jackson's gone. How much he plays this season, I think, will really be dependent on a lot of things. But I think he is going to push for that backup job right now. But again, he is a freshman. He's going to have his big moments. He's also going to have his mistakes in practice. So it's just about controlling those ebbs and flows for him and kind of remaining even keel. But I like the overall depth of this room better than where they were last year. And if Jackson Arnold can, live up to the expectations, then you have, no concerns about this room at all. It's just a matter of him, making some better decisions than he did in that Alamo Bowl, which is something that he's kind of worked on throughout the offseason.
Right.
Yeah, that depth is big right here, because when Brent Venables first got here, it was like you had one quarterback that you knew for sure could go out there and win games for you. Then last year you had two quarterbacks that you're really comfortable with. I think this year there's about 3 or 4 guys that you still feel comfortable with them going out there and leading this offense if things happen. I mean, that many going down would be crazy, but you would have that type of comfortability. I mean, we've seen Casey Thompson play, we've seen Jackson Arnold play, we've seen Michael Hawkins and what he's done in high school and how well he's performed so far in camps, things like that. I've seen Steele Wassel play in high school and how well he's performed. So I mean, you got guys like that. I haven't seen Brendan Zerbuck, so I can't really speak on him just yet, but we've seen some guys that you'd be very comfortable with them going out there if they had to. In a certain situation, just the way Jackson Arnold did against BYU last year. He had to go out there in the pinch and help their team win a very competitive game there. So that's the situation with this quarterback room. It's just you have more depth now besides just one quarterback. And hopefully you'll see a lot more scrambles too along with that, because you're not so timid on keeping a guy upright, which is what you saw that first year with Dylan Gabriel and things like that. So it paid off for him last year, and I think it'll be even better this year.
All right, let's go 1 to 10. You can use decimal points. I recommend it. In fact, to get more precise. Confidence level, the overall strength, it's your score. So you decide what you value more than anything. Bake it in. Well, we got 3 positions today, so we can all start once. So, Tom, you can start with quarterback if you want, and we'll have James start with running back, and I can start wide receiver. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, just for clarification, are we like – is this based on like confidence relative to all the other positions, or is it just like
That's
confidence
up to you.
in the position?
That's up to you.
Yeah, I asked this question.
I mean, I think that's fair. I mean,
say it again.
I think relative to the other positions is fair. I mean, I think if you're – yeah, I think that's fair.
I like that. I think I asked this last year, and I think that's what we came back to.
So basically ranking the positions.
Sort of.
If 10's the highest in terms of like your confidence, I think this, quarterback, you're probably feeling 7.5, 8. I think there are a couple positions that you're more confident in and feel better about, just their overall depth and experience going into the season. But if Jackson Arnold can kind of live up to those expectations and deliver like, they expect him to, the arm talent's there, the running ability is there, the big play ability is there. It's just a matter of, being comfortable in this offense, and, making good decisions, and trusting. I mean, he has the weapons around him to be great. He just needs to cut back on some of those mistakes that he made as a freshman. So I think probably, 7.5, 8 range is where you're probably going to be in terms of confidence in this position heading into the season.
Yeah, I'm around that area, probably like a 7.5, 8, because I think there are 3 different position groups on this team for sure that are better. I think you're more comfortable with right now, in terms of everything they brought back, the talent there, and everything like that. Because We just don't know how well Jackson Arnold's going to go out there and look. Now, if he goes out there and is the 5-star guy that we all think and saw that he did, especially early on with the Tulsa game and things like that, it would obviously be a much higher. But as of right now, 7.5, 8 it's really good. I think it's a really good spot.
Yeah, I see what you guys are saying. I'm more confident. You know, I was the guy who last year broached the subject of would Arnold just be better than Gabriel last year. So I have to back that up going into this coming season.
Just for the record, were you right about that last year, or?
Well, the world will never know. The world will never know. Arnold won the one game he came in.
Yeah.
I'll go 8.7. I'm very confident. I think Jackson Arnold's gonna be great. You know, I've been a believer in him since they got him. Since the first time I ever saw him, you know, play in high school and then Elite 11 and stuff. I've been in on him. This is his time. I'm ready for him to go for it. I love the Casey Thompson get. I think that was a perfect add as a backup. You know, if Jackson does go down at some point, that is somebody that you feel confident you can plug in. He won't be terrified of the moment. He's his 7th year of college football. He's been there, done that. He's played in OU Texas before. He's been in huge moments and played well in those moments. So I love that get. You know, I like Michael Hawkins a lot as well. If you needed him for any reason, maybe they might use Michael Hawkins in a gadget. We saw them do it with Arnold last year. I don't know. That was up to Jeff Lebby. I don't know, but you have that option if you want it. I like the room a lot. So I'm going to go 8.7. I think Jackson Arnold's going to be really, really good this season. Running backs.
Hold on. Let me just for the sake of this, right? So we're basing this off of the other position groups. So now that Tom and I have said about 8, 7.5 and 8, there's a different position group. Can they get that same number?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then my number is a little bit higher then, because the whole point I was down there is because I'm saying there are about 3 position groups that I'm more confident I think would be, on this team that are a little bit better. So I'm about 8.5 as well. I think 8.5 is the spot to be with this court because like I said before, there's so much depth in this room that you would feel comfortable with a lot of these guys if they can't come on the field to win you ball games. And so that's where I'm at. So sorry for the people that already wrote your comments hating on my numbers, but I'm changing it as we
made it much more complicated
as we move on. But here we go.
Just for the sake of clarity, I'll go with 8. So there's a difference between 7, and that is not a knock on Jackson Arnold. I think that he has a very bright future. I think he can be great. I just think that there are some things that he needs to go out and prove based on what we saw the last time he was in an actual game. There are some, questions about, this is a new offense coordinator. This is Jackson Arnold's first year going into a better conference, playing better defenses than the Oklahoma saw last season. But I think the overall health of the room is better than it was, at any point during, Brent Venables' first 2 seasons. So I have a lot of confidence in this room. I just think that there are a couple of positions that I'm going to rank higher, which is why I'm pulling back my number on quarterback.
You have to leave yourself room. Yeah, if that's how you feel. Running backs. So DeMarco Murray's room is loaded on paper. You bring Gavin Sawchuk back, who was phenomenal in the back half of the year last year. We just talked about Javonte Barnes is looking great in camp. Hopefully he can be healthy and be closer to that guy he was a couple years ago or better, as he said. You bring in Taylor Tatum. You also bring in Sam Franklin from UT Martin, who's kind of the forgotten guy right now. You also have Caleb Hicks back, of course, who's a guy that I really liked. Dalen Smothers transferred out. Caleb Hicks stayed. So you still have him in the mix. Like James said, Xavier Robinson also floating around in this room as another young guy. The room seems very deep on paper. Some general thoughts here, running back wise. We kind of talked about this a little bit already when we talked about Barnes and Tatum, but you have a great workhorse at the top with Sawchuk, and then it feels like you have lots of other options after that to rotate guys in and give teams a different look. It feels like one of the deeper rooms maybe on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you feel really great about Gavin Sawchuk, especially the way he finished last season.
Yeah, right.
He just made the Doak Walker Award watch list, which again, 80-something running backs make that. But I mean, he 100 plus yards over each of the last 5 games. He averaged 7.1, 7.2 yards per carry during that stretch, which if you do that over the full season, he would have been. Let me see. Top 8 nationally in terms of yards per carry. And that's really top 6 because there was a wide receiver and a quarterback
right
mixed in there too. If he can produce that over a full season and stay healthy, you feel incredible about this position. Javonte Barnes, if he can get back to his old self and even better, obviously, if he can establish himself as a number 2 guy, if Taylor Tatum can come on and be that home run hitter and kind of that guy that can flex out and into an empty set and catch some passes downfield, you feel really good about this room overall. Gavin Sawchuk, every time he's been given enough of an opportunity, he's delivered.
Sure.
6 100-yard games in his career, and each one he's had more than 10 carries. Every game he's had 10 or fewer carries. He hasn't, not that he hasn't produced, it's just that hasn't had over 100 yards. But when he gets to, more than 10 carries, he is going to get you 100 yards so far. If he can continue to do that in the SEC, again, you feel great about where this room is under DeMarco Murray.
For sure. And that's the same thing. Like the depth here is a lot better than last year. I mean, because you didn't even know who the starting back necessarily was. I mean, we all thought it was going to be like Barnes and somebody else, but it didn't even turn out to be that way. And then Tawee Walker took the reins for the first half of that season. And Marcus Major was in there. So it's good now that you know that Gavin Sawchuk is your guy. I mean, DeMarco Murray said it last year. He wants a workhorse guy, and then you fill in with everybody else so that you know who it is. So and as Tom said right off those stats, you feel very comfortable with him leading the way. I mean, just a guy like that, he was more of your decisive back that could pick his spots in the hole before bursting through, and he's one of the fastest guys on the field most of the time. So having his speed and everything like that, it just paid a good way. And you add guys like Taylor Tatum, who's also known for his speed, to this group of running backs. I think it's a very good running back room. As I said, the depth is a lot better, and so I'm going to be very high on my rating with them as well.
Yeah, no, James. I agree completely. You guys remember we talked about it, a few months ago, whenever the heck that was. Tawee Walker talking about last season that they just didn't know who was going to start. Sometimes on game day they didn't know. Am I going to get carried? Like, I feel like that's not going to be the case this time. Gavin Sawchuk knows he's the guy. Javonte Barnes talked about that yesterday, that he's the leader of the room. He's kind of commanding the position. And then I think Barnes is going to probably wind up being his number 2 with Tatum and Hicks and all those other guys in the mix. I think having more clearly defined roles and hierarchy will be good for this position this season. All right, 1 to 10. James, you can start this time, and then we'll go me, and we'll have Tom go third on this one.
I like this group. As I said. So I'm going to go 8.0. So right on 8. A really good group of running backs, as I talked about. The different assets that these guys bring, the speed, the patience, then you got guys that can run over people, Xavier Robinson, Javonte Barnes, you bring those guys in. I think it's a really good mix, and given the situation, those guys could excel in what they're provided, so I think it's a really good running back group. 8.0 is a very good running back room for me.
Yeah, I had quarterbacks at 8.7. I'm going to go at just a tick below for running backs, 8.5. And what dings it a little for me, and I love the room, I think all the guys are really talented, is just the health aspect of it. Gavin Sawchuk's missed a lot of time. Javonte Barnes missed all of last season, essentially. And then Tatum's a freshman. Hicks hasn't really had to do it. Xavier Robinson's a freshman. Sam Franklin, that's a big step up from UT Martin to the SEC. The room is crazy talented. But if you're looking at proven commodities, it's kind of thin. But it's a really good room. I think if Gavin Sawchuk stays healthy, kind of to Tom's point, and gets carries, he will have a huge year, and his numbers will be crazy. And then I love the rest of the room. But if you're going to ding it for something, that's what it would be for me. So I'm going to go 8.5.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Josh in terms of my thinking, based on scaling it from where I was at quarterback. If quarterback's an 8, I think running back's probably a 7.5 for me, 7.5. But same reasoning. I mean, you got 2 guys who have dealt with injuries their first 2 years as your most experienced, guys in the system, with Gavin Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes. It's good to hear these things about Javonte Barnes, but you want to see him produce on the field when he gets that opportunity and make sure he can stay healthy. Gavin Sawchuk, again, when he's been the guy, he is capable of putting up big numbers. But he had that hamstring injury that limited him for pretty much the first half of the season. You hope he can avoid that, because hamstrings can be very fickle, kind of like feet. But I really like this room, and if they can stay healthy, they're going to be a very strong point of this team, especially with kind of just we still expect this to be a kind of up-tempo, fast-paced offense. But I think you're going to see a more physical running game with Seth Luttrell, just given his background, kind of his own, his playing background and his coaching background. I mean, remember, he was a fullback.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw that video that Oklahoma posted a few days ago where they're asking, everybody coming through the locker room, if you could participate in an Olympic sport, which would it be? And, Seth Luttrell's like wrestling. I mean, I think that just kind of speaks to what you kind of think the physicality of this offense can be, even though it's going to be more up tempo. But again, I'm high on this room too. But 7.5 is going to be my confidence level just because the injury concerns.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's kind of the same as like last year when we're coming into this, like that wide receiver room. It was a lot of unproven guys we didn't know necessarily just yet, and they ended up being great. Had a lower rating, and they ended up being great. And so that can happen again here. You always got to look at things like that because, as we said, a lot of these guys have great potential, have great assets that they can bring to this team. So it'll be fun to watch, man.
Yeah, it's an air raid offense, at its base, but they're going to run the ball. I expect it to be fairly balanced over the course of the year. And yeah, if you told me right now, Gavin and Javonte are healthy the whole season, like no hiccups, I'd go probably over 9, frankly.
Yeah.
But it's been a problem. I don't know. We'll see. Wide receiver. So we'll close here with wide receiver of today. Emmett Jones. Obviously, we've sang his praises since he got the job. The room is, by all accounts, arguably the deepest position on the roster. Obviously, we'll bear that out as we go through this thing, but loaded up. Obviously, we talked about Angelo Anthony is back. Hopefully, he can be healthy. I don't think people have forgotten, but remember how good Angelo Anthony was before he got hurt? He was the best receiver on the team. He was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Khalil Farouk is back. Jaden Gibson, people have been loving on what he's done so far. We just talked about how great Nick Anderson looked. And then you have just a million other guys who could be factors. Brennan Thompson, Zion Kearney, Jacquez Petaway is still in the mix here. I'm sure I'm forgetting Deion Burks. I didn't even mention Deion Burks. Like, the room is crazy deep. Yeah, this is a loaded position, I think, obviously, right? I mean, probably you could make the argument deepest on the whole team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there really is to say. They returned 71% of their receiving yards from last season, and
just Drake Stoops. Yeah,
it's mostly Stoops, and they're replacing him with a guy who didn't have the same numbers, but might be a better overall receiver in Deion Burks.
Sure.
Again, we talked about it in the spring. He looks really good in that slot position, not just kind of being that safety valve type guy that Drake was a lot last season, but a guy that can stretch the field for you. And you feasibly have 5 guys that can really be deep threats on this team.
Mm-hmm.
We heard the term a lot last season with the receivers that their goal is score from far. I think they're more adept at being able to do that. We'll see how often they try to do that in an offense that's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, like Nick Anderson was a freshman All-American last year. He seems like he's going to have a huge season. Deion Burks is, this morning The Athletic put out their annual freaks list. He was on there. He's a guy that if he has a big season, he can be a first rounder. Nick Anderson has the makeup of a first round guy. If he continues to produce, Jalil Farouk, healthy. He was their number 3, number 4 receiver last year. Just a guy that's kind of been consistent. You almost overlook him because of some of the other options in this room. Jaden Gibson, a guy that we all think is going to have a breakout season. If you don't consider last season a breakout, so to speak, because his opportunities were a little bit more limited, but he delivered when he had his chances. And then again, getting Angelo Anthony back whenever that is that you get him back full speed, that is a luxury for this team. Having a guy like Jacquez Petaway working in the slot behind Deion Burks, that is a luxury for this team. And then the freshmen and other underclassmen that they have under them. Again, we've sung Emmett Jones' praises. Just the way that he has kind of reconfigured this room and developed that depth there is impressive.
I mean, yeah, we've talked about it a lot. This group. This is going to be my highest group because I said early in the year this is who I thought was the best position group on the team. I mean, and it's going to get even better as we talked about with Emmett Jones bringing more guys in next year. Mm-hmm. So it's incredible the amount of different things that they can do with this group because you got guys that are 6'2" and higher and things like that, and you got these speedy guys, Deion Burks, Like it's just so many ways they can dissect defenses with this personnel that you're probably going to see a lot of these guys get a handful of snaps each game because they all can just do something different. And, whatever the situation is going to bring up is who you're going to put in there. And I think it's going to be really, really good. I mean, you replaced Drake Stoops, who was, I guess, the most productive receiver for this team last year, with a guy who's a little bit faster than him, has a little bit more experience on the field and things like that. And so it's going to be fun to see. I mean, it's going to be fun to see what this group does. I'm going to be very high, obviously.
Yeah, I think we all are. I guess I'll start, and then we'll Tom and then James for this third one. Going real high, I'm going to go 9.7. It's going to be one of my highest ones, obviously, if not the highest. I got to kind of decide. There's one other one that I'm thinking about. I think they're probably people could guess. But
yeah.
9.7. The only thing really keeping it from being a 10, frankly, is just the respect for Drake Stoops and the fact that he was the guy last year. And when it was a money down, you went to Drake Stoops. He was the guy that you trusted above all else in a key moment to run a nice clean route and catch the football. So you have to replace that. That's not nothing. But the team, it's obviously crazy deep and loaded. We talked about that just now. I mean, it's just names on names on names. And you replaced Drake with a guy who we all think is going to be great and could be the best receiver on the team potentially in Deion Burke. So I'm going to go 9.7, really high. It's a great room. And like to James' point, Emmett Jones has done such a really good job at obviously the depth, but then different body types, different. It's not just redundancies. It's guys that can all do different things. That's so huge. And this room absolutely has that. So 9.7, really high for me.
Yeah. With all due respect to Drake Stoops, he became the guy because Andrew Anthony went down midseason. Drake emerged on the second half of the year, and he became that almost security blanket for Dylan Gabriel last year.
Yeah, he definitely was.
When they needed the tough yardage, they went to Drake over the middle. Obviously, he had 10 touchdowns. Nick Anderson had 10 touchdowns. So it was a little bit more of a deep threat. Jaden Gibson 5 touchdowns. But that being said, I'm gonna repurpose my thing from last week on the show. 10.0
decimal.
10.0. I think that this is going to be the best position on the team. Narrowly. I think you guys can probably guess the other position that's going to be close to a 10.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But, I think this is the deepest. This is the best room on the roster right now. Because again, you're losing Drake Stoops, but you're replacing him with a guy that is, again, with all respect to Drake Stoops, more talented than him.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm actually at I thought I was going to be the highest on this show. That's crazy. Tom's already at a 10. I'm at a 9.8, which is slightly higher than Josh, and it's only because I'm not sure. When we saw Andrew Anthony running around and things like that, but can he be the guy that he was before that injury? And that's
sure.
That's always hard to judge because you never know. I mean, especially with guys that are speed guys. Having that type of injury can be daunting to what they do and what they how productive they can be. So that's the only reason I'm not a 10. I mean, just not knowing what he's going to do. But on paper, I mean, these guys, it's definitely a 10 for me. But it's a 9.8 because of Andrew Anthony's injury right now.
Yeah. But the thing is, they Andrew Anthony is a luxury for them right now. Like they don't.
I get it. The
depth in that room is where it's like, oh, if Andrew Anthony is not 100% healthy, you still feel like you have no drop off with a Deion Burks, with a Nick Anderson, with a Jalil Farouk, with a Jaden Gibson, with a Brandon Thompson. There is another guy that you can just say, run as fast as you can. We're chucking it deep. Again, I mean, maybe I'm having a little hot take here with my 10.0, but I just think this position is stacked.
I mean, we're 9.7, 9.8. It's not like it's.
I mean, there's other guys. I mean, we didn't even talk about there's Zion Raggins, who's like blazing fast, and then there's Ivan Carrion, who's a giant. Mm-hmm. The room is ridiculous. It's absurd. There's some mild injury concerns, I guess. I mean, Nick Anderson looked great, but he was nicked up. Jill Farouk sat. I mean, I guess if you're going to just try and poke holes somewhere, but. Not a lot to be worried about. Loaded group. Emmett Jones did a phenomenal job. Definitely, it's at worst, I think, the second strongest, and you can definitely make the argument it's the most strong on the roster.
And I also wondered how much this wide receiver room was very productive last year, and it's also because the tight ends didn't get as much involved in the passing game. Maybe does that change Yeah, they drop off a little bit there too as well. Just because you think Joe John Finley getting his touch, that the tight ends would get more involved and things like that. They have more weapons now in that group, which we're going to talk about, in a different podcast, but we'll get to that later. But how does that affect everything as well?
Yeah, man. And again, I think that just kind of speaks to the position that they are putting Jackson Arnold in going into this first year of starters. Like, he has the weapons.
Yeah,
like if that offensive line can keep him clean, he is going to be really good.
Yeah, it could be it's going to be a very great offense. The offensive line is there. This offense is exactly what you would need. I mean, I couldn't. You wouldn't have anything to complain about. I feel like we talked a lot about the running backs last year because we didn't know what was going on, and guys had to step up. But there will be nothing to talk about negatively about that if everybody plays up to their standard and the offensive line is good. So it's a good situation to be in.
And that segues nicely into next week. We'll have tight ends and offensive line next week. Two very interesting positions to talk about. Tight end's been completely remade, and offensive line's been the talking point of the offseason. So we'll get into that next week. We'll break that down and give our confidence rating and all that. Then we'll do defense the next 2 weeks after that, going into the first game, which is getting very, very close.
It's crazy.
That's it for now. We'll be back. I think Colin and I are going to do a show on Friday, maybe. Don't quote me on that. He's still coming back from vacation, so we got to figure that out. But look out for that. Hopefully later this week, catch up on some recruiting stuff with him. 3 of us will be back next week to talk about more of what's going on from fall camp and do that tight end and offensive line position preview. We will see you then. Be sure to subscribe to Oklahoma.247sports.com. Lots of great content there already, VIP stuff. Got some camp intel. Recruiting's going to pick, getting going with high school football season, getting close to starting. So lots of great stuff coming up. Great time to jump aboard with us at Sooners Illustrated. We'll be back later this week and then into next week. Continue our fall camp coverage. Get ready for the start of this season, which is coming up in just about 3.5 weeks. For Tom Green, James D. Jackson, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.